My name is Opaline Carter, and the night my sister left me on the side of the highway, she told me I needed to learn my place. She didn't say it in anger. She said it with the kind of calm cruelty that comes from years of knowing exactly how to cut me down. The rain wasn't what stung. It was the smirk on her face as she drove off, convinced she had broken me for good. That was the moment I realized my sister wasn't just cruel. She was dangerous, and if I didn't fight back, she wouldn't just destroy me. She'd destroy our mother, too. The storm hammered against the windshield as the wipers struggled to keep pace. On I-40 that night, the world narrowed to the hiss of rain and the glow of a flickering fluorescent light at a lonely rest stop. Evelyn pulled the car to a halt, her fingers drumming on the steering wheel with a kind of calculated calm. She rolled the window down, rain blowing in sideways, and looked at me with that same condescending tilt of her chin I'd known since childhood. "You need to learn your place," she said evenly, almost rehearsed. "The army didn't make you smarter, it made you arrogant." Before I could answer, she leaned across, shoving the passenger door open. Cold rain spilled inside, soaking the seat, and her smile tightened into something cruel. "Out!" she ordered, voice edged with a satisfaction she didn't bother to hide. I didn't give her the scene she wanted. No begging, no shouting. Instead, I slipped my phone from my jacket pocket, screen low, recorder already running, capturing every word, every tone dripping with contempt. I stepped out, boots splashing in a shallow puddle, and closed the door carefully, quietly, because slamming it would have been a gift to her pride. Her eyes scanned me, hungry for fear. I gave her nothing. With a sharp nod, she rolled the window back up, tossed one last look at me as if she had finally won, and drove off. Her taillights bled into the downpour until there was nothing left but rain and the buzz of the lone light above the restroom. I raised my hand shoulder high and cut 2 slow arcs through the air. The signal already agreed upon. Minutes later, headlights swept across the lot, steady and sure. Marcus Hale pulled up, window sliding down, his expression unreadable, but his presence solid as bedrock. He didn't waste words. He just handed me a dry towel and asked, "Audio clear?" "Yes," I answered, voice steady. "Every word." As heat wrapped around me inside his truck, one thought anchored itself, sharper than the storm outside. Evelyn thought abandoning me here would break me. She believed humiliation would be the final blow. But what she didn't know was that I had just turned her cruelty into the first weapon in my arsenal. This wasn't the night she shattered me. This was the night I began to fight back. It was late afternoon when I stopped by my mother's house. She was sitting quietly in her chair, her voice faint when she asked me to grab a can of soup from the pantry. Her memory slipped in and out these days, and sometimes even simple requests came with a hint of confusion. I opened the pantry door, the familiar smell of spices and canned goods filling the air, and reached behind the rows of beans. My hand brushed against a yellowed envelope shoved deep in the corner, dusty and oddly out of place. I pulled it free, curiosity tightening in my chest. Inside were documents, legal ones, bearing my mother's shaky signature. My eyes froze on the title line, a deed transfer of the lake house in Kentucky, the one my grandmother had left for all of us, now signed over solely to Evelyn. The date made my stomach knot. That morning, my mother had been barely able to remember what day it was, and yet here was her name on a contract that stripped her of her rights. My pulse quickened as I dug deeper. Folded between the pages was an overdue utility bill. A payment of $25,000 had been pulled from the trust under the heading Roof Repair. No receipts, no contractor, no record, just money gone. I leaned back against the counter, the envelope still open in my hand, and let the pieces fall together. Evelyn parading her brand new Lexus in front of the family last month. Evelyn bragging about finally getting to enjoy life with weekend trips. At the time, I brushed it off as arrogance. Now it looked like theft, not petty jealousy, not sisterly rivalry. This was deliberate exploitation of our mother's fading clarity. I folded the documents carefully and slid them back into the envelope. I said nothing. Outwardly, I kept my expression calm when I returned to the living room, asking my mother if she still wanted soup. But inside, the conclusion was solid. Evelyn wasn't just cruel, she was stealing, and if I didn't act, she would drain everything. The next evening, I met Marcus in his garage. The smell of motor oil clung to the air, tools scattered across the workbench, and a humming fluorescent light buzzed above us. Against the far wall, he'd pinned a large map of Tennessee with red pushpins marking our mother's house, the local bank, and Evelyn's office. It looked less like a family dispute and more like the staging ground of a mission. Marcus leaned on the table, arms crossed. "We treat this like an operation. Evidence is ammo. Lose one piece, we're dead in the water." I nodded, then laid out the rest of the team. Asha Patel, a forensic accountant I trusted from a veterans networking event, joined us on a video call. She had a sharp eye for tracing money trails hidden beneath layers of shell companies. And Naomi Wright, a lawyer who specialized in elder law, agreed to back us legally, her voice steady but urgent. "Courts are finally cracking down on financial abuse like this, but you'll need airtight proof." We hashed out roles quickly. Marcus would handle surveillance and security. Asha would dig into the trust, the withdrawals, the shell companies. Naomi would prepare motions and legal strategies. My job was to coordinate, keep chain of custody intact, and make sure every step was documented like a mission log. As Asha scrolled through her first review of the accounts, her voice sharpened. "There's a Nevada LLC in Evelyn's name, barely registered. $60,000 has moved through it in the last 2 months. No vendors, no payroll, just cash out." The room went still. Marcus muttered under his breath, and Naomi shook her head. "If this keeps up, the trust will bleed dry before you can blink. We need more than suspicion. We need something she can't explain away." I studied the map, the pins, the thick envelope of copies now in my bag. My decision came without hesitation. "Then we move fast. We're not treating this like family drama anymore. From this point forward, this is a campaign, a mission, and failure isn't an option." Marcus worked quickly, hands steady as he installed the cameras where no one would ever notice, one under the eaves outside, another tucked into the corner of the kitchen, and a third angled toward the dining table. My mother hummed softly in the living room, oblivious. Evelyn, as usual, was too absorbed with her own performance to suspect a thing. A week later, one of the cameras captured exactly what we'd been waiting for. Evelyn slid a thick stack of papers across the table toward our mother. Her tone was sweet on the surface, but sharp underneath. "It's just taxes. Mom, sign here and the IRS won't bother you." My mother's hand trembled over the pen. Her voice cracked, barely above a whisper. "I don't understand these things." Evelyn leaned closer, voice tightening. "Trust me, just sign." Watching it back on Marcus's laptop, my chest tightened like a vice. The evidence was clear. My sister wasn't guiding. She was coercing. This wasn't the stuff of family spats or sibling rivalry. This was proof, cold, undeniable proof. I felt my stomach turn, the sting of betrayal sharper than the storm that night on the highway. My voice came out low, steady, colder than I thought possible. "This isn't family anymore. This is war." Evelyn staged the dinner like a performance. The house was lit like a showroom, the table dressed in crisp linens, candles flickering as though warmth could be faked. Crystal glasses clinked as relatives settled in, their faces eager for a distraction, for gossip. Halfway through the meal, Evelyn lifted her glass, smiling with practiced ease. "My sister means well," she said, laughter ringing too loud. "But she treats everyone like she's still in uniform. She may know discipline, but when it comes to money, she's clueless." A ripple of awkward laughter rolled around the table. Some cousins glanced away. Others nodded, eager to stay on Evelyn's good side. I said nothing. My phone, silent in my pocket, recorded every word. Later that night, as the dishes clattered in the sink, Asha's call came through. Her voice was tight. She pulled another 30 grand from the trust today. No explanation. Just gone. I stared at the window, rain tracing lines down the glass. My decision was immediate. I dialed Evelyn, softening my tone until I sounded small. You're right. I don't understand finance. I'll step back, handle it all, if that's what you want. Her laugh was triumphant, the kind of laugh that echoed with victory. She believed I'd finally surrendered. Marcus caught my eye when I hung up, his voice dry, steady. That's the bait. She's going to overplay her hand. I turned back to the rain, calm and deliberate. She thinks I'm beaten, but the moment she believes that, I let the thought harden in my chest. That's when the trap will close. The television glowed in my mother's living room, casting a pale light across the walls. On the screen, Evelyn sat in a studio chair, dressed in a soft pastel sweater, her makeup natural, a tissue pressed dramatically to her eyes. She let her voice tremble, timing each word for the camera. I've carried this family on my back, she sobbed. While my sister tears us apart, Opaline only knows how to bark orders like she's still on the battlefield. But a family isn't an army. It needs care, not commands. The camera cut closer, zooming in on her hand clenched tight around the tissue. Knuckles white. Most viewers might see grief. I saw calculation. Then came the surprise. A clip rolled of Mrs. Randall, our 78-year-old neighbor, standing on her porch, her voice thin but resolute. She told the reporter Evelyn had once offered to help manage her finances, only for $100,000 to vanish. I believe she stole it, Mrs. Randall said firmly. That single interview ripped through the town like lightning. By nightfall, social media had exploded. Hashtags like "Ow, Trust Fund War" and "Sisters Fight" trended relentlessly, strangers debating who was telling the truth, and for the first time, the weight of public opinion shifted against Evelyn. I sat back and saved the entire broadcast. She thought she had mastered the story, but all she had done was load the gun and place it in my hand. Evelyn had just wounded herself, and I was ready to make sure the damage lasted. That night, the garage hummed with tension. Maps of Tennessee were pinned across the wall, red dots marking banks and properties. Printouts of transactions fanned out under the harsh light. Marcus leaned against the table, arms crossed, while Asha tapped at her laptop and Naomi flipped steadily through her notes. We need her overconfident, I said, my voice low but steady. The more she believes I've surrendered, the faster she'll slip. When I called Evelyn, I softened every syllable. You were right, I told her. I don't understand finance. I'll step back. You can handle everything for Mom. I don't want to fight anymore. Her laughter spilled through the phone, rich with triumph. She believed she'd won. What she didn't know was that Marcus was already parked across from a downtown bank, camera lens trained on the glass doors. Later that night, he handed me the footage. Evelyn and her so-called financial advisor, her boyfriend, a man already scarred by fraud investigations, walking out with a thick envelope of cash. At the same time, Asha turned her laptop toward me. She's pulled $40,000 in just a week. The numbers glowed on the screen, damning and undeniable. Naomi shook her head, tapping her pen against the desk. It's good, but the judge will want something that leaves her no room to wriggle out. I stacked the files one over the other, the weight pressing down on my hands, though my chest felt strangely calm. Evelyn thought she was in control, but with every careless move, she only tangled herself deeper in the net. And soon enough, that net would close. The courtroom felt colder than the storm that had once soaked me on the highway. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sterile glow on the polished wooden benches. The gavel struck hard against the block, and silence fell. Across from me, Evelyn sat poised in a tailored suit, her lips curved into a smug smile, as if she had already secured the victory. Naomi rose first, calm, precise. She laid out our case piece by piece, the video showing Evelyn pressing papers into our mother's trembling hands. The bank statements marked with unexplained withdrawals, Asha's expert testimony about the Nevada Shell Company. Every document, every timestamp, slid neatly into the record. Evelyn's attorney leapt to his feet, his voice loud and theatrical. He waved a stack of papers, claiming the withdrawals were mine. According to him, I had siphoned money to cover personal expenses. He pushed the pages across the table, trying to paint me as the villain. Naomi's eyes sharpened. She flipped through the so-called evidence with a measured calm before lifting one page for the judge to see. "This notary seal," she said evenly, "was revoked 2 years ago. These documents are fraudulent." A ripple of shock swept through the room. Murmurs rose in the gallery. The judge's expression darkened, and Evelyn's smile flickered. I stood slowly, my pulse steady, and pressed play on my recorder. Evelyn's voice filled the courtroom, dripping with disdain. "Remember who left you out here. You'll know who controls the money in this family." The words hung heavy in the air, undeniable and damning. Silence clamped down so hard it felt like the room itself held its breath. Then the judge leaned forward, gavel poised. "All assets of the Carter Family Trust are hereby frozen. Evelyn Carter is stripped of all management authority. Temporary control is granted to Opaline Carter." The gavel struck once more, the sound like thunder in the stillness. Evelyn sat motionless, her smirk erased, eyes wide with disbelief. I straightened my shoulders, spine locked in quiet resolve. For the first time, she realized the ground had shifted. For me, it felt like a battle won, not the war, but the first hard victory, claimed with the discipline of a soldier and the certainty of truth. The federal courthouse in Nashville smelled of old wood and tension. Reporters crowded the entrance, their cameras flashing as I walked past. Inside, the weight of the room pressed down on me. This was no longer a family squabble. It was the full force of the law. Asha took the stand first, her voice steady as she revealed the trail of $500,000 funneled into a Cayman account. The FBI confirmed the findings, explaining how the case had expanded, how the grand jury had indicted Evelyn for wire fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy. Witness after witness stepped forward. Mrs. Randall's voice trembled, but her words were sharp. She smiled at me while stealing every penny of my savings. My mother, in a rare moment of clarity, spoke haltingly, tears in her eyes. She said if I didn't sign, she'd send me to a cheap nursing home. Evelyn's composure cracked. She shook her head, voice rising. "She's always been jealous of me." Then came the final blow. The prosecutor displayed an email Evelyn had sent to her boyfriend. "If Opaline finds out, we're both finished." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The jury needed only hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge pronounced 10 years in federal prison. Full restitution required. As the marshals cuffed her wrists, Evelyn thrashed, shouting, "I'm the only one who ever carried this family." The pearls around her neck clattered against the steel of the handcuffs, a bitter soundtrack to her fall. The office was modest, tucked into a quiet street in Nashville, but to me it felt like a fortress. On the wall behind my desk hung the sign for the Carter Shield, the nonprofit I had built from the wreckage of everything Evelyn tried to destroy. Its mission was clear: protect the elderly and veterans from financial abuse. The walls were covered with letters, handwritten notes in neat or shaky script, thank yous from people who had been spared from exploitation because we stepped in. Each one felt heavier than any medal I'd ever earned. Marcus pushed the door open, holding 2 cups of coffee, his boots echoing softly on the hardwood floor. He set one on my desk and gave me a half smile. "From a stormy rest stop to this," he said quietly, "we've come a long way." Across the room, Asha was bent over a stack of ledgers, carefully logging another case, her pen scratching steadily. Naomi stood at the filing cabinet, signing off on a petition to protect a widow whose son had been siphoning her checks. The rhythm of our work was constant, precise, and it felt like purpose. But it was the wall opposite my desk that always caught my eye. There, framed beside our mission statement, was a letter from Evelyn, written in a hand still sharp with venom. Its final line read, I hope you've finally learned your lesson. I turned toward the window. Outside, rain slid down the glass. Not in torrents, not in storms, but in a gentle patter, steady and calm. It no longer felt like threat or humiliation. It sounded like renewal. She was right, in a way. I whispered to myself. I did learn a lesson, but not the one she meant. I learned that discipline and truth will always outlast manipulation and lies.